Apple took 44 years to become a trillion-dollar company. Nvidia took 31. SpaceX did it in a single morning, the morning it went public. The valuation is $1.77 trillion, and the company has never sold you a single share until now. So either the market has lost its mind, or it knows something, and we can use math to figure out which. Here's the headline. SpaceX goes public at $135 a share. Multiply that by roughly 555 million shares, and you get $1.77 trillion. That's not biggest tech IPO of the year. That's biggest IPO in human history. Bigger than Saudi Aramco, a company that literally sells the oil the world runs on. SpaceX sells rocket rides and internet from space, and apparently that's worth more than petroleum. Welcome to the future, I guess. Now your instinct might be that this is insane. And I want to validate that instinct, because it's a healthy one. But before we call it insane, let's ask a sneakier question. What would SpaceX have to do to deserve this price? Because a stock price isn't a fact about a company. It's a prediction, written in dollars. And predictions can be tested. So let's start with the most important idea in all of finance, which finance people have managed to make sound terrifying. A stock is worth all the cash it will ever hand back to its owners, every dollar, from now until the heat death of the universe, added up. That's it. That's the whole thing. But there's a wrinkle, and the wrinkle is the entire game. A dollar next year is worth less to you than a dollar today. Not because of inflation. Well, not only because of inflation, but because a dollar today could be invested and grow. If you can earn 10% elsewhere, then a dollar a year from now is only worth about 91 cents to you right now. A dollar in 10 years? About 39 cents. A dollar in 50 years is basically a rounding error and a fond memory. This is called discounting, and it gives us the discounted cash flow formula. Value equals the sum, for every year t from 1 to infinity, of the cash flow in year t divided by 1 plus r, all raised to the power t. The r is the discount rate, finance's polite term for the returns you're giving up by parking your money here instead of somewhere else. For stocks, it's usually somewhere between 8 and 12%. We'll use 10, because round numbers make me calm. Now, look at what this formula does. Each future year's cash gets divided by a bigger and bigger number, because the exponent keeps climbing. So the cash flows shrink as they march into the future, like a row of bars getting tinier and tinier until they vanish. The future matters, but it matters less the further away it gets. The market has a short attention span, mathematically. Adding up an infinite number of shrinking terms sounds like a nightmare, and in 1959 a man named Myron Gordon looked at this nightmare and said, what if it weren't? If you assume cash flows grow at a constant rate g forever, that whole infinite sum collapses into one beautiful little fraction. Value equals next year's cash flow, divided by r minus g. That's the Gordon growth model. An infinite sum, replaced by a fraction you could write on a napkin. Mathematicians call this the magic of geometric series. Normal people call it thank God. So let's point this fraction at SpaceX and see what falls out. We know the value, $1.77 trillion. SpaceX currently generates around $5 billion a year in free cash flow, actual money left over after running the business, and R is 10%. So we have 1.77 trillion equals 5 billion divided by 0.10 minus g. Solve for g, and you get the growth rate the market is secretly assuming. Rearrange the algebra. G equals R minus cash flow divided by value. That's 0.10 minus 5 billion over 1770 billion. 5 over 1770 is about 0.0028, basically a rounding error wearing a tuxedo. So G comes out to about 9.7%. Forever. And here's where you might relax. 9.7%. That's it? That sounds totally reasonable. Companies grow 9.7% all the time. Crisis averted. Everyone go home. Except, read the fine print, which finance always hides in the part you skip. That 9.7% isn't growth from a startup in a garage. It's growth on top of a company already throwing off $5 billion a year, and it has to continue every single year until the sun explodes. For context, Apple, the most valuable company in history, grows around 5%. The entire S&P 500 grows around 7%. SpaceX would need to outrun the entire American economy, indefinitely, like a man who has to jog faster than the planet is spinning. The math is possible. It is not what I'd call relaxing. But growing the same rate forever is a fantasy, and we know it. Real companies grow fast, then slow down, like everyone who's ever made a New Year's resolution. So let's use a grown-up model, the two-stage DCF. Fast growth for a while, then a calmer terminal growth rate forever after. Let's be generous. Say SpaceX grows cash flow at a blistering 30% per year for 10 years, then settles into a sleepy 4% forever. After 10 years at 30%, that $5 billion becomes 5 times 1.3 to the 10th power, about $69 billion a year. Not bad for a company that builds things that occasionally explode on purpose. Now we value everything from year 10 onward using Gordon's fraction, 69 billion divided by 0.10 minus 0.04, which is $1.15 trillion. But that's in year $10, so we discount it back to today, and it shrinks to about $443 billion. Add the cash from the first 10 years, discounted, another $55 billion or so, and our grand total is roughly $500 billion. 500 billions. The market says 1.77 trillion. We are off by more than $1 trillion, which even by finance standards is a noticeable amount of money. So either our model is wrong, or the market is pricing in growth faster than 30% a year, for longer than a decade. The market, apparently, is feeling spicy. So is the market just drunk? Maybe. But there's a better explanation, and it's that SpaceX isn't one company. It's three, in a trench coat. First, Starlink, satellite internet, around $10 billion in revenue, basically a monopoly on beaming Wi-Fi from orbit. Second, launch services, about $5 billion, with roughly 80% of the global market, because everyone else's rockets are expensive and theirs come back and land like it's no big deal. And third, Starship, Mars colonization, point-to-point travel where you fly New York to Tokyo in 40 minutes, asteroid mining. And that third business is the whole story. Because the $1.77 trillion isn't a bet on rockets, it's a bet on a probability. The market price is what mathematicians call an expected value, every possible future, multiplied by how likely it is, all added together. So the price equals the probability Starlink stays a monopoly times its value, plus the probability Starship works times its value, plus the probability of failure times whatever's left of the wreckage. Here's the wild part. Suppose Starship actually transforms human civilization and that future is worth $5 trillion. And suppose the market thinks there's a 35% chance it happens. Just that one branch, 0.35 times 5 trillion, contributes $1.75 trillion to the price. The entire valuation is essentially one big maybe about Mars. The market isn't claiming SpaceX will do this. It's claiming there's roughly a 1 in 3 shot, and pricing accordingly. That's not insanity. That's a casino with a spreadsheet. And history says this kind of bet sometimes pays off spectacularly. In 1999, Amazon traded at 100 times earnings, and every serious analyst called it a delusion. Then it crashed 90%. They were right. And then it grew 100-fold, which means they were also catastrophically wrong. The math back then demanded 30% plus growth for 15 years, and Amazon casually delivered 35%. Tesla in 2020 got the exact same "this is madness" treatment, followed by the exact same awkward vindication. But here's the sobering part, because I refuse to let you get too excited. A 100x price-to-earnings ratio is right about 1 time in 5. The other 4 companies crash and become cautionary tales in finance textbooks. So the real question isn't is SpaceX the next Amazon? It is SpaceX the one Amazon, or one of the 4 corpses? And nobody knows, including the people charging you $135 a share to find out. There's one more risk the spreadsheets are weirdly quiet about. The entire Thesis is wearing one man's t-shirt. Elon Musk is what insurance actuaries, the cheeriest people alive, would call a single point of failure. Say there's just a 2% chance per year that he leaves, gets removed, or otherwise exits the picture. Over 10 years, that's 1 minus 0.98 to the 10th, about an 18% chance the whole story collapses. By the math, that should knock 18% off the valuation. The market does not appear to fully price this in, which is why analysts argue endlessly about whether Musk is a premium or a discount. He is, somehow, both at once. So, is SpaceX worth $1.75 trillion? Here's the thing the headline can't tell you. That number is not a fact about SpaceX. It's a collective bet about the future, compressed into a single price tag. The DCF formula is just a machine that turns beliefs about tomorrow into dollars today, and run in reverse, it tells you exactly which beliefs a given price requires. The market is betting on roughly a 1 in 3 Mars miracle. Whether that's brilliant or bonkers depends entirely on what you think happens next. The math won't tell you the future. It'll just tell you, very precisely, what everyone else is assuming. If you enjoyed turning a terrifying number into something you can actually argue about, subscribe to Improper Integral for more visual math and science, and we'll see you in the next one.